continuing this.
Collapsing in Turkey hours after a series
Not
of
balloons. We're
earthquakes
done
and
with the fucking balloon
aftershocks
bullshit.
on February 6th.
We're
First,
done. We're done. We've seen all the balloon nonsense that we needed to see. We'll do Nikki Haley's presidential bid after this.
bottom floor crumbled. Then, the rest of the building came down on top of it in what's known as a pancake collapse. Thousands of buildings near the epicenter in southern Turkey and northern Syria tumbled straight down in a similar way. The intensity of the earthquakes alone carried the potential for destruction. But it's the pancake collapses that have made this one of the deadliest disasters in the region.
Even a very well designed and well executed building would have suffered. This doesn't rule out that the building was free of defects.
How well buildings protected residents played a significant role in lives saved and lost.
Clearly, a lot of these buildings were not up to standard.
The death toll continues to climb as many victims are still stuck under the weight of the buildings. So what is
Remember when the government's like, oh, 3,000. It's at 42,000 and still rising. And the original estimation from even international outlets, international organizations, was that it would be 30,000. We've already passed that. It's going to be worse than that. Gösterdim abi bu dediğini.
is it about these buildings that has made this earthquake even more devastating? First, let's look at the larger region that's prone to severe earthquakes because of these two fault lines. They sit along tectonic plates that meet one another and cause friction. When the friction builds up, a powerful earthquake is eventually released. Over the last century, Turkey has seen major earthquakes along both fault lines. The most recent one happened here. This is the seismic impact that shows the epicenter. When you take a closer look at the most impacted areas, they were densely populated with Syrian refugees who ended up living in buildings that were haphazardly built and largely neglected.
That's where my family's from, on my mother's side. Kilis. Right there.
And across the border in Syria, buildings in these areas were already weakened by the prolonged civil war. But what really complicates this disaster is that Turkey was aware of the buildings that were the most high risk. They're called soft story structures. A soft story building is typically a large structure with multiple floors and an open plan on the bottom. That bottom floor can sometimes be a parking garage, space for small businesses, or extra homes. These buildings are very common throughout the world, especially in countries like India, Pakistan, and Turkey, because they offer a solution to overcrowding in densely populated areas. But they historically do a poor job of withstanding medium to powerful earthquakes. Here's why. These columns here are usually made of wood, and the stories on top might be made of heavier materials like concrete.
These things fucking literally fall on their own without an earthquake, by the way.
Sometimes the bottom floor has fewer walls than the ones above, with sides that may be left open or columns that aren't connected by walls.
Yeah.
This means that a soft story is the weakest floor and cannot fully support the heavier ones above it. So when an earthquake hits, the structure may shake until that bottom floor collapses. During powerful earthquakes like Turkey and Syria's, the remainder of the building may follow.
For the record, this isn't the only reason, okay? This is one of the main reasons for sure, because a lot of buildings have this shit. And as we've talked about already, okay, I'm glad that like Vox is covering it too. I'm a structural engineer in LA. You better watch what you say because I'm calling you out. I mean, this is something that people living in those buildings before they actually, for example, like open up more space for markets and stuff, they would tell the government to not do this. Okay, they would try to petition the government to actively stop the construction of a market underneath like buildings like this, and the government's like, yeah, fuck off. No, it's gonna happen.
Kind of collapse traps people under heavy construction materials, making rescue missions even more difficult.
ابن عمي ومرته مع 3 اولاد لهلا ما معروف عنهم شيء ساكنين بالثاني الفني.
I can't see him. I can't see him.
This is worse than war.
But this is a challenge Turkey has faced before. A comparable 7.6 earthquake hit Izmit in 1999 and caused over 17
Hasan, no offense, fuck Erdogan, obviously, but do you wholeheartedly believe that if a different government, a lib one, was in power, these buildings would have better structures? Fuck no, dude. They don't actually give a fuck about poor people. Brother, they fucking have buildings that collapsed in CHP-controlled areas, too. One of the main areas. So, yeah, clearly, liberals are not fucking great at this either. The difference is, there would have been a material difference, 100%. There would have 100% been, instead of like 100,000 deaths, there would have been 40,000 deaths. You know what I mean? Like, that's a gigantic difference. Obviously, it's still not going to, it's still, and it's not even just this. This is just one element. This is one element of like wanton corruption in Turkey over the course of the past multiple decades. You know what I mean? There was a town in Hatay that's controlled by CHP that didn't have a single building collapse. It doesn't matter. There's only one area. There are other listen, that's not true, first of all. That's only one area. One area over multiple different areas where there were also CHP leaders that where there are still plenty of casualties and plenty of buildings who collapsed. Understand that yes, this is corruption from you know this is corruption from those in positions of power, regardless of what their political perspective is. But ultimately, it still would be better.
15,000 deaths.
It still would be better.
It became clear that poor building design and soft stories, which made up nearly 90% of building collapses, exacerbated the death toll in this disaster. The aftermath pushed the Turkish government to reintroduce building codes with an emphasis on earthquake safety. But they weren't enforced due to corruption, and many buildings in Turkey were built well before 1999, which meant those buildings could only be strengthened retroactively. There is a way to keep soft-story buildings intact in the event of an earthquake, retrofitting them with materials that can support the weight of the structure. In an ideal scenario, these wooden columns can be replaced or reinforced with steel frames. These open walls can be reinforced too, and extra bolts and braces can be drilled into the foundation. So if the structure shakes, there's support from that bottom floor. A solution like this seems simple, but it's extremely expensive to execute. According to the World Bank, around 6.7 million residential buildings in Turkey need retrofitting or reconstruction at a cost of $465 billion. As of 2021, only about 4% of those buildings were transformed. In fact, retrofitting is an expensive undertaking and nearly impossible even in countries like the US. Here is every remaining soft-story building in San Francisco.
Yeah, bro, you're right. Poor people don't care about themselves. That's the problem. It's one of the main problems, totally. Because poor people have a fucking say in what kind of building supplies are used when they're renting their building, dude. Are you fucking stupid?
That needs reinforcements that would cost billions.
They have no say in the matter whatsoever. Even fucking middle-class people have no say in the matter. Most people are renting. What the fuck are they supposed to do? They have no power over this.
Another problem in Turkey is that construction companies have been cutting corners and ignoring building codes for decades, and the Turkish government has let their violations slide. According to the BBC, this post advertised a building that complied with Turkey's latest earthquake safety regulations, which emphasizes the use of strong materials. But the way that same building collapsed suggests it was a soft-story structure. Now, Turkey is cracking down on contractors that are allegedly responsible for these collapses. The scale of this disaster is a result of complex factors, like geography, neighborhoods still reeling from war, and weak buildings. But what makes this moment particularly harrowing is that while earthquakes along fault lines are inevitable, many of these deaths didn't have to be. Turkey, along with other countries near fault lines, are all prone to intense earthquakes. But they won't have to be this deadly if cities enforce codes and treat safe housing as a human right.
Yeah.